Good morning, everyone. Good Shabbos. Someone once said there are 3 stages to life: youth, middle age, and hey, you look great. But on a serious note, there are 4 stages of life, and that is as follows. We start off, someone once said, as our parents' children. Then we become our children's parents. Then we become our parents' parents. And then we become our children's children. But in Judaism, there is no such thing as a generation gap. You know, one of the saddest expressions that you hear sometimes is people referring to their father as my old man. Why? Because especially in today's generation, parents have to ask their kids how to do certain things on the computer, and you know, your 10-year-old is telling you how to navigate the apps or the passwords or whatever it is, and the kid could grow up with an attitude, my old man, you know, he's out of touch, he doesn't know, I'm advanced, I'm sophisticated, he's still living in the dark ages. And in Judaism, of course, that doesn't exist. Why is that? In this week's Parsha, we find that when Yaakov blesses his grandchildren, and Rabbi Veyech says that the first Jewish grandfather was Yaakov. It's the first person in the Torah we find who had an active relationship with his grandchildren. He lived the last 17 years of his life with his grandchildren, learning with them, involved with them on a day-to-day basis. So when he blesses his grandchildren, he says, Ephraim and Menashe, my grandchildren, Keruven v'Shimon Yuli, should be just like my children. What is Yaakov saying? What Yaakov's saying is that usually each preceding generation gets more distant from the father, the grandfather, the great-grandfather. He's in the old generation. But Yaakov says there's no difference between the generation of my children and my grandchildren. They're just like my own children. Why is that? Because when you have a Torah and you study Torah, that links all the generations equally. Because it doesn't matter if you're 90 years old or you're 9 years old. When you sit at the Shabbos table, you're discussing the same Torah portion, the same mitzvahs, the same holidays. You're observing the same commandments identically. And so there is no gap. There's no separation. There is what Rabbi Veyech calls a covenantal community. We're all together in this. And therefore, there's no break in the generations. And that's called Misorah, a heritage that goes on from generation to generation. We're doing what our ancestors did not just 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. There's a continuous connection between all the generations. And that's what's beautiful about Yiddishkeit. You know, you sit around the Shabbos table, if you're lucky enough to have a Zayda at the table, or an Elta Zayda, a grandfather, great-grandfather, the children and the grandchildren, you could have 4 generations sitting around a table, and they're all on the same page. They're all discussing the same things. They're living the same life. They're observing the same Shabbos. They're all connected through the Torah. And that's what Torah does. There may be modernity that creeps up and creates certain styles. Maybe the new generation dresses a little different than the previous generations, new fashions, new styles. But those are just superficial things. On the core values, we're all connected throughout all the generations. The story told about this guy walking through a desert. And he's tired and weary. And he looks at the desert and he says, desert, you're of no use. Because when I walk and I'm tired, you give me no assistance. But when I travel the sea, the water currents push me along. They help me on my journey. And the desert responded to this man, this weary man. And he said, yeah, you're right. The sea may give you some aid, some assistance when you travel. But you leave no imprint on the sea. On the desert, you leave footprints. Leading an observant life of Torah mitzvahs requires more effort, more commitment, more dedication, more sacrifice. But it's a life in which you leave footprints that your children and your grandchildren and, God willing, your great-grandchildren, all future generations will remember your footprints and continue walking in your footsteps.